Hello, my name is Kristen Fan and welcome to Daily Smiles. Happy news stories brought to you in each episode. Today, we are doing a recap of the month of January and highlighting some of the most inspiring and uplifting news stories captured. We start with our first story taking place in a hospital in Louisiana. The son of Connie Despany and Benjamin Hall was born this month at Lafayette General Medical Center. They plan on naming him Kingston and were still searching for a middle name when they received a kind-hearted letter. This letter came from a woman named Jamie Fortenot, whose father just passed away that same day in the same hospital. Jamie was prompted to reach out to the young parents by a song she heard playing through the speakers in the hospital when grieving the loss of her 86-year-old father, James. When she asked the hospital staff about the song, they informed her that the song was played whenever a new baby was born. She quickly found comfort in knowing a new life had come right after her father's passing and wrote a letter directed to the family of the baby. Kingston's parents were so overwhelmed and moved by the letter, they agreed to make the baby's middle name James in honor of Jamie's father. The hospital staff arranged a meeting between Kingston and his parents and Jamie. Now the two families continue to keep in touch, and Jamie was even present for Kingston's christening. Up next, we head to North Carolina, where inmates were picking up trash on the side of the road to reduce their jail time when their security officer, James Smith, fell due to a medical emergency. Instead of taking advantage of the opportunity to run away, the inmates from the Bladen County Jail helped him by calling an ambulance, using his phone, and stopping traffic on the highway to ask for help. Once Smith was admitted to the hospital, he was diagnosed with a stroke. The three men stated that they were simply happy Smith was okay and received a life-saving award from the local sheriff department. One of the inmates was quoted after saying, "He's a good man. He's more than police officer. He's more or less like my friend. He's just a really good guy all the way around." Now we visit Rachel Snooper, who is a sixth grade teacher from New York. She was washing dishes as usual when she accidentally shattered a wine glass that cut an artery in her wrist, causing her to bleed everywhere. However, she remained calm, wrapped the wound, called 911, then reached out to her mom. First responders from the local fire department came and helped control the bleeding. However, they went above and beyond even after they did their jobs. These courageous firefighters took care of Snooper's son Declan, getting him into pajamas while making sure the two remained calm as the ambulance arrived. Once Snooper was taken by the ambulance, there was no one to take care of Declan as her husband was still at work, and her mother was still on the way. This led to some of the firefighters voluntarily staying behind to watch over Declan and the house. While Snooper was still at the hospital, they helped clean the blood off from around the house. Like, imagine a group of firefighters wiping blood off of individual coffee cups. They even left Snooper a sweet note telling her to feel better and have a glass of wine in their honor. To everybody, raise their glass. Recently, the Chicago Cubs baseball player, Cole Hamels, donated his $9.4 million property to help children with special needs. His donation was to Camp Barnabas, which is a nonprofit that facilitates summer camps and other adventures for children with chronic illnesses and special needs, including their siblings. The property that Hamels donated includes 100 acres of land and 32,000 square foot mansion. He and his wife's property donation was the largest donation that Camp Barnabas has ever received. The director of marketing, Andrea Harp, commented on the donation and how it will benefit the foundation for years to come by, also bringing publicity and attention to help spread the charity's mission and goals. Earlier this month, Mark Walsh, a disabled veteran, lost his wallet. His wallet contained his credit cards, IDs, and hundreds of dollars in cash. However, to his surprise, two people were kind enough to return his wallet with everything still in place. Walsh was called back to the store when the wallet was returned and watched the security footage of two kids honestly returning the wallet with everything inside. Walsh claims to have pulled over while driving, crying due to his relief and happiness. Walsh was desperate to find the two kids and eventually found the 14-year-old Vincent sisters and was able to thank them. In Kansas City, Missouri, a homeless man named Dave Cochran lives out of his car with his dog and girlfriend. They were driving through the ice and snow when they noticed cars getting stuck in the powder, including someone with a Texas license plate. Cochran pulled over to help him out. The driver in the car was Jeff Allen, the offensive lineman for the Kansas City Chiefs. He was driving to his game against the Indianapolis Colts when his car got stuck. Without Cochran's help, Allen may not have made it to kickoff on time. After his game, Allen shared a tweet in hopes of finding Cochran that read, "My car got stuck in the snow before the game, and a nice guy named Dave helped me pull out without knowing I was a player. I wanted to give him tickets to the AFC Championship game for helping, but don't have a way to contact him. He drove a 97 or 98 black Suburban. Please retweet." The tweet was then shared thousands of times, and Allen managed to contact Cochran, who has never been to a Chief game before, and admitted to crying when finding out he was given this opportunity. And to end off the news section for our January episode, we'll learn about the historic hospital located in Montreal that has been closed since 2015. This building has now been transformed into a temporary homeless shelter to make sure no person will be forced to sleep out in the cold. The hospital rooms have been converted into an 80-bed homeless shelter and is open to men, women, and their pets. The homeless shelter opened as the hospital opened as a shelter when more shelter around it were becoming filled to capacity. The legislators, there are currently working on plans to come up with solutions that create permanent housing for when the shelter comes in the spring. Thank you for joining us as we discuss some of the most heartwarming stories from this month. We will now cut to an interview with Elena Mujica, a Los Altos High junior who founded a club at the school called Viva Venezuela. Hello, my name is Kristen Fan, and I'm here with Elena Mujica, who is a junior at Los Altos High School. This past year, she has founded Viva Venezuela. Can you tell me a little bit more about the club?
So Viva Venezuela is a club dedicated to collecting school and medical supplies to send to Venezuela, which is currently in a severe economic depression that has turned into a humanitarian crisis, leaving many without access to basic medical supplies and school supplies.
Going off of that, why did you decide to found this club?
So I am Venezuelan. Ever since I was a little girl, my family would take trips to Venezuela every year, either for Christmas or for the summer, to visit my grandparents, to go to the beach, to be with my family, eat the food, experience the culture. And that was a very major part of my identity growing up. But unfortunately, in 2010, with the rise of Chavez, the dictator at the time, it became very unsafe for us to be there, and we just stopped going in 2010. I was about 8. The crime had worsened significantly, especially with really intense socialist rhetoric. People had started lashing out at members of the middle class and upper class, who they deemed to be the enemy or threatening their way of life. So many of my family members were held at gunpoint or knife point, just walking in the streets. I mean, naturally, Venezuela is a third world country, so crime is to be expected, but it got to the point where my parents didn't feel comfortable bringing their kids around to Venezuela, and so we stopped going. At that time, I didn't really understand what was happening. I just kind of thought things were a little bit weird, and we were just gonna hang out with our family outside of Venezuela. So it's not that I didn't get to see my family. We saw each other we met in other parts of the world, like in Miami, but we never went back, and I kind of lost touch with the country. So while I was worrying about 7th grade dances, Venezuela hit a major economic depression in 2014. The Venezuelan economy is largely dependent on oil. It does not have a very diverse private sector or public sector. 95% of the economy is based off of oil and oil exports. So when the price of oil fell dramatically in 2014, I think it was about 50%, the country fell into a severe economic depression. And due to very intense mismanagement by the dictatorship, it only worsened. Their economic policies were not beneficial at all to the people, and it just developed into a humanitarian crisis where basic goods were not available because the country didn't have the money to import them. So you may have heard of news stories where there are lines out the door, hour-long lines for grocery stores, not even to buy amenities, but to buy like corn flour. And even that, many people can't get their hands on it. It's even worse in hospitals because a lot of medical supplies are super expensive and they cannot afford not anything to treat very intense diseases like cancer. That's just out of the question. But even basic medical supplies like Band-Aids and pain relievers and Tylenol are not available. I know of many hospitals that don't have soap or gloves, and these are very basic things that we definitely take for granted here in America. And so it's impossible to provide care for people, and many children and adults are dying from very simple infections like staph infections, which you could get easily treated here, simply because they just can't import the supplies because they don't have the money. There's not a lot of power also. The electricity is very shaky, and so many times incubators and people on life support just lose power and babies die. I read an article where a surgeon in Caracas said, Caracas is the capital of Venezuela, a surgeon in Caracas said, the death of a baby is our daily bread. And I mean, reading that just sums it up. It's awful. And unfortunately, I didn't really know about this until I was a freshman, because while I was in touch with my family, I wasn't in touch with the country. But as a freshman, we had to write a paper on a human rights abuse in a given country, and I decided to write about the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. And with that, I connected with my aunt, who at the time was a pediatrician at the Dr. Luis Ferracetti Hospital in Barcelona, Venezuela. She's now the director, actually. She was made the director a few weeks ago. But we started talking, and we started talking about how fortunate we are here and how they're lacking such basic supplies there. And since I was really involved with my church's service ministry at the time, I decided to gather supplies, school and medical supplies, to send to Venezuela my sophomore year. And then with the help of my friends at the Do Something Club at the school, we also held a drive at the school. And then I also asked people around my neighborhood, which were, they were all super willing to help out. And with all of that positive response that we got, I decided to kind of take advantage of the student body that we have here at Los Altos, which can be very engaged if you kind of put their minds to it. So that's why I started the club here, was to kind of establish this as a movement.
So how have you gotten other people to care? Like you said, not a lot of people in our student body are from Venezuela or know about what's happening there.
So, I mean, I barely knew about what was happening in Venezuela, so I can assure you that most people don't. I don't think many people could pinpoint Venezuela on the map. So it really began when we first started the club, was just telling our friends about it and having them come to our first meeting and see just kind of what we had to say, myself and my sister, who's the vice president. With that, a lot of people just realized how fortunate we are here and how we actually had the opportunity to make a real difference, especially given the fact that this had already been established last year. I had kind of found a process, and I had shown them pictures of what my aunt was sending me and what was going on in her hospital, and it made something very distant very, very real. And so we've just kind of had to keep engaging people. We don't have a trip like ODFL or Haiti Club. We can't obviously go down there because it's incredibly unsafe. But just making sure that people know that we're making a difference is how we've gotten people engaged, and people have brought in their friends who also have other skills and gifts. And it's just been really heartwarming to see how people have gone from just simply supporting the idea to actually dedicating their time and their efforts to making this club a reality.
So can you take us through the process of gathering the supplies and then shipping it to Venezuela?
Sure. So first, what we do here is we have fundraisers and we have drives. So fundraising, essentially, we're just collecting money to ship things to Venezuela, and the drives is where we get the bulk of the medical supplies and the school supplies. So we just asked people, as I said, we did things at the school, at the church, and in my neighborhood. And what I did my sophomore year was I just gathered all the supplies in my room, just right along the floor, just covered everything. I could barely walk. And we just sorted through everything. We got the soaps in one piles and the Advil in the other. And then we my first time we sent things to Miami, we were actually going there for my cousin's baptism. So we just loaded everything into suitcases, and like 3 suitcases. We just took them down to Miami, and we left them there. And then with the second kind of flow of supplies, we shipped them to Miami. It's where my family is. My grandparents had to move there because of the situation in Venezuela, as well as my aunt and her family. Them and also their friends were super supportive, and they helped package everything in the boxes needed in Miami to send them to Venezuela, and then they stored them there. It was definitely getting them to Miami, though, was much easier than getting things to Venezuela, because the government, it is a dictatorship, and they really don't want to appear weak to other countries. So they have not accepted humanitarian aid. And there have been stories of warehouses full of supplies, just like in Miami, because there's a high Venezuelan population there, where they just can't get into the country because they can't get the import papers. And so there have been a lot of back channel ways to kind of get around that. Since there's a lot of Venezuelans in Miami, a lot of shipping companies to Venezuela have popped up, so people can send supplies to their family members that are still there. So we kind of took advantage of that. We communicated with one shipping company, and they were willing to bring our supplies over by boat, which takes about a month. But again, there's always issues with that too, like we at first were supposed to have someone on a plane that was supposed to deliver our supplies in about a couple of days, and then they bailed on us at the last second, and so we had to kind of scramble and find someone else that would be willing to take our supplies to Venezuela. And from there, they get to my aunt after they go on the boat for about a month. They got to my aunt, and she is the director of the hospital, and she's also the director of the hospital, and she's also the president of the Rotary Club of the area. So she takes them and distributes them to the hospital, and also to the school supplies go to needy kids in the slums, because they, of course, can barely afford to get food. They can barely find food. And so we're trying to make sure that they still have the opportunity to get an education in spite of the current economic depression.
So as a club, what are your guys' future goals for this year and next year as well?
So right now this year we just had 2 fundraisers where we got a lot of the student body helped buy boba, which is going to help. Boba sells. Yeah. But it's going to help us cover the shipping, because getting things to Miami and getting things to Venezuela is very expensive. And then next week, actually, we're having our first drive at the school, and we'll be collecting medical supplies, very basic things that you could find at Safeway or probably in your own medicine closet. There's Tylenol, Advil, vitamins, Band-Aids. Baby formula is obviously not something that most people have, but it's definitely in need, as most mothers don't have the nutrition that they need to provide their babies with milk, and so they really need baby formula, and also just toiletries and soap. So we're hoping that brings in a lot of supplies, and we're hoping to have another drive second semester. More long term, and we'll of course send those to Venezuela at the end of the year, and to my aunt, and she will distribute those. More long term, we're hoping to engage the Los Altos community, reach out to other organizations. Like, I want to work with my church again. I'm hoping other club members have other organizations that they'd be willing to kind of work with us in this effort. We're trying to just get more people involved and more aware, to make this not just like a small club at the school, but like a larger movement where people know what's going on and they're willing to help out. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with our goals. Of course, we can't fix Venezuela. It's a systemic, very deep-rooted systemic issue with the government and with the economy that honestly we don't have the means to fix. I don't think any outside source can really do that, and I think they're unfortunately stuck in a situation that is going to be very, very painful and difficult to get out of. So what we're really trying to do here is sustain the people that are still in Venezuela, save lives, because just because they're in the situation does not mean that they don't deserve the right to survive, get proper medical care, and get proper education. So really, we're just trying to keep people alive, get people educated, and hope that one day Venezuela will come out of this stronger.
Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us today on Daily Smiles. I'm your host, Kristen Fan, and I'll see you next month. Hello, my name is Kristen Fan.